Right, what we're going to do is follow the instructions. This is a photograph Miss Berry has taken, and what we're going to do is draw lightly, sketch the structure of this image. So the first thing I'm going to do is probably sketching the horizon. If we look at the Y axis, it's slightly higher than halfway. So on the box below, I'm going to make a halfway point and go slightly higher. Similarly at this other side, so I'm going to do a similar thing there. There's a slight shape to it, it might be coming down a little bit. There's a hill about this point. As I mark things on the X, I can take marks coming directly down. Comes along, it comes up a bit. There's a little gap in some trees here, about there. A little clump of trees here. It's coming down. If you notice, I'm drawing very, very lightly. So some trees about there, and they're coming downwards down to here. This point there. That's about halfway. That's our halfway point. Yep, it's about there. Now it comes down to here. If I come to that point, I'd say it's about there. It's like a hill that comes down. But there's this wall feature, this dry stone wall. There's that slightly larger rock there coming up. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm beginning to sketch. I'm going to take a measurement off this side. See, I'm using the tip of my pencil on the line. My fingernail to indicate the edge of the box. So I know that line starts there, and if we look at the angle it's coming down, it's quite steep to there, it becomes quite shallow, and then at this point, I'm coming straight down to look at it, there's a tree, bushy tree that comes up to about there, and I want to know the height of that tree, so if I'm measuring from here to the edge of the box, I've got that measurement here, yep, I'm about right, nice check mark there. There's a sort of big tree here, there's a bigger tree sort of in this area, I can see a bit of a building. It looks like it's at a slight angle. It's got little windows in it. Got a little bit of a roof, but not much. You can't see too much of that building. Another tree. The bottom of that tree line comes into here. So you can construct it using this kind of technique, little bit at a time. Don't try and draw the whole thing. Just focus on a little section. So at the top of that tree, there's a dry stone wall coming across this field. At this point, it likes to go slightly higher and across. There's another tree there, tree here, and so on. So I've sketched in most of the shapes and structures here. Now we're going to look at the work of Van Gogh. Now we're going to spend some time looking at the mark making and the direction of the line. Look where the water, the tide comes in. Look at these lines where the water's been running away. Look how he's described the surface of the sand as little dots. Let's move on to this other image. This guy is out in a field. Look at the vertical growth of the corn and look where it's been cut down. See the horizontal mark. So he's using directional line to suggest volume. Now we're going to try that with our pen. So you can do this in pencil if you don't have one, but a pen actually gives you a different type of mark and will work quite well. So into this dry stone wall, I'm going to focus on a particular stone here. I've roughly sketched that in, but I'm not too worried about it being perfect. So there's a darkish section just here and here at the bottom. And how would I describe this rock? It's kind of got little marks. There's a side that's receding from it and there's a front face. This is the side that's receding there and that's the front face. So I'm going to handle this side in a slightly different way to the front face. At the bottom, it's kind of receding as well. It's kind of moving down away from me. So I'm just going to put some marks that suggest a bit of depth into there. So that's the first rock. So I'm going to draw a little bit of shadow between the next rock. Look for some marks into that, little textures. And you can see I'm doing little textures, lines, dots, whatever feels appropriate. Now you are learning about mark making and trying to create a little bit of volume, as well as describe surface through texture. So this is quite experimental for you. These marks are not heavy. They're not big clunky lines. I'm going to pull a piece of paper in front of me. So they're not big heavy hatching. They're quite small and delicate and gentle. You can build up hatching, but see how I'm doing it in a much more calculated and careful way. We don't want kind of messy lines like this or edges that do that. Let's go back to the job. Now we can look at this wall. I'm going to come down and just do the rock below. Now no one is going to sit and look at the photograph for hours and then look at yours and say that's completely inaccurate. What we're trying to do is create the illusion of something that's similar. So I would handle the wall in a similar way. Now I'll come to the plants. Plants are a bit tricky here. They're kind of like flowers growing up at this side. But if you draw heavy outlines, if you notice, the plant stems are lighter than the area around them. So you might kind of work in the negative space, leaving some sort of little light areas, and think about the light bits that you're leaving. So you're trying to create an illusion of something that's similar. If you saw Van Gogh's field and if you saw that beach, they would not look exactly like that. So you're experimenting with mark making, and just like handwriting, we all will have a slightly different style. You'll look at somebody else's and think, I quite like that, but find it hard to replicate those marks maybe. But develop your own particular style. So you see I'm building up something that at first doesn't necessarily look like the plant, but as I work into it, you'll see it. Now, if you go further into the image, as long as I'm working with darker areas, here I'm looking at that, there's a hill there that's receding away and then there's some kind of bush behind it. So I'm not going to draw a heavy line around it, but I'm going to draw that bush as quite a dark thing, but a little bit of texture in it, because it's made up of leaves. Then into the field beyond, I'm looking for these little lines in the grass. I can see some sort of horizontal marks. See how I'm now applying horizontal marks. So I'm not making it up completely, I'm taking it from the image. Now at first you might think this image isn't going to come together, but only through concentrated effort will you get the whole thing to work. Now I am jumping around a bit rather than finishing any section. I'm going to add some little windows to that building. I've added a couple more than there probably are. That's probably the roof line up there. I don't want to draw a cartoon house in the middle of this. See how I'm drawing this shadowy tree at the back? It's not solid, it's got texture into it even though it's very dark. So I'm creating, look, the kind of little arcs, these marks, and popping them into there. Now the tree that's over here looks slightly lighter. So the density and distribution of the marks I'm putting down now is going to be a little bit more spaced out, creating a slightly lighter tone. So if you had a lot of trees in an area, you can create different textures to describe different levels. And here I can see some lines coming down into there. It gets a bit darker under there. There's a light section here. So I'm going to put less marks into there because it's lighter. Then it gets darker in this tree bank over here. So I'm going quite dark. I've not gone and reached for a thicker pen. I'm sticking with the same fine one, which will take a bit longer, but at least the marks will be consistent. Depending on what you're drawing, sometimes you do change pen and change scale. But you begin to see what I'm doing. Right, so I've done a little bit more there, and I'm just going to put this row of trees in at the back here. See how they're darker than the ones in front of it? So the first thing I'm going to do is just draw a dark edge, and then I'm going to create shape and textures a bit like trees. Now these are in the distance, so they're going to be really, really small marks rather than big marks. Look at the work of Van Gogh's, they're quite small because that is further away than here. So I'm going to just add some smallish marks up there. There's an open field here, there's some dark marking to it there. I can see something sort of whitish. I'm going to draw a little bit of that wall coming in. Not drawing it as a big solid heavy line because it doesn't look like that. There's something up there that might be buildings. I've never been to this place, so to some degree I'm kind of guessing what some of this stuff is. Kind of trying to interpret it. There's a little bit of trees on there, but that's very dark on that top of that field. Onto the horizon here, I can just see some little trees and marks. See how I'm just doing little teeny marks to suggest it. Top of a tree there, another one slightly lower. These ones, see how I'm coming in and down because they're coming across the boundary of a field here. Now that's creating some sense of depth, but there is a hill, a really faint hill right in the distance. So don't want to draw that too heavy. I might just draw a few little marks into it. Into here I would continue those trees. See a bit of wall connecting. Spatially, I haven't got it exactly right, but it is a drawing. It is not a tracing. So I'm not too worried about that. This tree here, I'm just popping in here. It's slightly lighter at the front, so I'm making the trees behind it a little bit darker. That means I can handle that one. Get that light onto it just there. I've got these little horizontal marks suggesting the field there. Now I am not going to do much more onto here. It's not finished. But the purposes of making a video aren't necessarily to show you something start to finish, to show you some techniques so you can apply them. So have a go, see if you can create something that's quite interesting and learn about mark making.